Here we go. Good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate that help. As you just saw, the President was honored to host the swearing-in of Attorney General Sessions in the Oval Office just a short time ago. Under Attorney General Sessions, the Justice Department will return to its original core mission to uphold the rule of law, to ensure that justice is administered and enforced fairly and impartially for all Americans. Attorney General Sessions, come on in. I'm sorry. Well, you know, it's a Trump briefing. Attorney General Sessions is a world-class legal mind and experienced prosecutor, and the President is pleased to have him finally in place as our nation's top law enforcement officer. After the Attorney General's swearing in, the President signed 3 executive orders dedicated to standing behind the police officers who risk their lives every day to protect us in our communities, reducing crime, and stopping cartel violence. The first executive order directs the newly installed Attorney General to develop a strategy for more effectively prosecuting people who commit violence against members of law enforcement. We must better protect those who protect us. Our men and women in blue need to know that we're with them 100% as they patrol our streets. Unfortunately, this has not always been the case. Law enforcement officials have been vocal about the lack of support they received under the past administration. This lack of support demoralized many officers and in some cases led to their discouraging their engagement with local communities, only causing further harm and deterioration. It's imperative that federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies better coordinate and share information across jurisdiction to better serve and protect our communities. This order will start the important work of doing just that, instituting a holistic approach that involves the whole of government. It also directs the Department of Justice to work with other federal agencies to come up with ways to further reduce violence against law enforcement, and orders a hard look at how the Department of Justice and other agencies use their law enforcement grants. The second order establishes a task force led by the new Attorney General to reduce crime and restore public safety in communities across America. Together, the members of this task force are going to come up with specific recommendations how we can change existing federal law to better prevent crime and improve public safety, and develop stronger working relationships with our state, local partners. The President is confident this task force will develop a systematic strategy to help further protect the American people. Communities across our nation have been devastated by a surge in violent crime rates, particularly our major cities. Over the last 8 years, we've experienced declining focus on law and order. Crime reduction will clearly be a priority for this White House. The last executive order refocuses the energy and resources of the federal government to dismantle transnational criminal organizations such as drug cartels. It's important to emphasize that we cannot reduce crime in the United States without additionally addressing illegal immigration and illegal drugs. Through this executive order, the President instructs the Attorney General to form a comprehensive and decisive approach to destroying transnational crime organizations and drug cartels. These cartels represent a clear and present danger to our nation. They bring dangerous criminals, drugs, and violence to once peaceful neighborhoods, both here at home and in other parts of the world. They have fueled addiction and overdose deaths, and they can no longer be allowed to operate with impunity in our country or our hemisphere. This order pulls together the experience and resources of federal agencies to work towards emphasizing specific goals in this regard. Number 1, to upgrade our information gathering about these transnational organizations and cartels. Without accurate information about these threats and the ability and willingness to share this information, we're not going to be able to tackle this problem. It's important to note that prior to this administration, if you had called the Department of Justice to ask for these statistics, they never kept them. So knowing what we're facing is a big part of addressing the problem. Number 2, improving the speed and efficiency of removing criminal aliens, cartel members, and people who help cartels from our nation. Unlike during the last 8 years, these criminals are finally going to go home. Shift whatever resources we can to tackling these organizations and prevent them from disrupting our society any further. Now, onto the President's schedule. This morning, the President held a breakfast and listening session with key stakeholders in the airline industry. We've got a participant list if you're interested. The President thanked the attendees for the 10 million jobs and $1 trillion in annual economic income activity they contribute to our economy, and praised them for moving approximately 2 million passengers per day in spite of the outdated infrastructure and equipment that they have in terms of air traffic control and other infrastructure measures. The President asked aviation leaders what the government can do to help their industry grow and create more well-paying jobs for Americans. The leaders commended that they have never been given the opportunity to work truly alongside the president in such an open and constructive way, and they were unanimous in asking for the president to offer relief from the duplicative and burdensome regulations that are stifling job creation, which he assured them he'd do. The president also reaffirmed his commitment to forging public-private partnerships that will rebuild America's crumbling infrastructure. He pledged to work closely with the airline industry to modernize the technology system that keep our nation's airports running and to expedite the approval process for future airline infrastructure projects. It's the president's goal to make sure the United States has the most advanced airline system in the world, and this meeting was an important first step in achieving that. After the executive order signing, the president spoke with the president of Afghanistan and the emir of Qatar. My understanding is that we should have readouts shortly on both of those calls. Just concluding, a few moments ago, the president held a Supreme Court and legislative listening session and lunch with Democrat and Republican senators. In attendance were Chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa, Senator Heitkamp of North Dakota, Senator Tester of Montana, Senator Donnelly of Indiana, Senator Manchin of West Virginia, Senator Moore Capito, also of West Virginia, Senator Cornyn of Texas, Senator Alexander of Tennessee, Senator Coons of Delaware, and Senator Bennett of Colorado. The president expressed his hope that these senators and their colleagues will give Judge Gorsuch a fair consideration and vote based on his qualifications to serve on the Supreme Court. With over 100 federal judicial nominations potentially happening during this administration, it's critical for us to have an open dialogue and work towards bipartisan agreement so that our justice system returns to its important work on behalf of the American people. Later today, the president will speak with the Emir of Kuwait and the Prime Minister of Iraq. We will provide readouts of those calls moving towards the conclusion of them. We also anticipate that the Senate will hold a vote to confirm Secretary-designate Price this evening into the early hours of Friday to be the next Secretary of Health and Human Services. The president was glad to see that the Army Corps of Engineers announced last night the final easement for the Dakota Access Pipeline. With this final federal authorization completed, the president working to reduce further unnecessary delays, this infrastructure project can finally continue to move forward. The construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline was one of the president's campaign promises and the subject of one of his first executive orders. The administration is pleased that Americans will be going to work building this pipeline and building it with American steel whenever possible. Now, looking to the upcoming schedule, tomorrow the president will welcome Prime Minister Abe of Japan. The president and the prime minister will hold a press conference at 1 p.m. in the East Room. They will depart Washington around 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon for Mar-a-Lago, where the president is honored to host the prime minister at the Winter White House. As we recently announced just earlier today, Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada will visit the White House on Monday. The president looks forward to a constructive conversation and strengthening the deep relationship that exists between the United States and Canada. The president will also host Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel next Wednesday. We'll have further guidance on the press availability potentials for either one of those. One last thing before I take your question. Amid surging levels of CEO confidence and in the wake of incredible job announcement made by the White House yesterday by Intel, there's also new numbers released today by the Department of Labor showing that unemployment claims are at near historic lows. The president knows better than anyone what business needs to create jobs, and the market is responding to his policy improvements. This administration will continue to roll back burdensome regulations and lower the overall tax burden on Americans so they can hire even more people and create even more innovative projects. With that, I'll take your questions. Caitlin Collins.
Thank you. Hundreds of bureaucrats at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau make more than members of Congress. 40 of them make more than Vice President Mike Pence. Does the president have plans to revamp this agency? And if so, does he feel that he should be able to fire the head of the agency at his will?
I think I've addressed this before, but we have no updates right now on the head of CBPB. If we do, I'll let you know. With respect to the first part of that question, I think one of the things that you're going to continue to see from this president is a respect for taxpayers' dollars, the money they spend, and how they're spent. We are going to continue to review all aspects of government. I think you'll see further announcements as far as how he's going to look at how he's going to approach and innovate and update government. The bottom line is that we should be paying people a fair wage for their service to this country, but that we should be doing it in the most effective and efficient manner. And I think that's what the president has already shown towards his commitment towards helping reduce the cost of several programs through the government, and bringing back jobs, but there's going to be respect for taxpayers in this administration, so that whether it's salaries or actual positions or programs, he's going to have a very, very tough look at how we're operating government, how many positions they're in, what people are getting paid. But the president understands that most Americans are out there working night and day trying to get by, and that Washington truly needs to respect the money that they spend. And then we should be doing it in a way that shows that with a level of respect in terms of how many people we're hiring, what they're paid, what programs we're looking at, whether or not that program's duplicative. But it's not just about one department or one agency. It's really about looking at how government as a whole operates. John.
Sean, questions have been raised after Kellyanne Conway did an interview, I believe it was with Fox News this morning, where she appeared to, from the confines of the Brady briefing room, promote the products of Ivanka Trump. Do you believe that she crossed an ethical line?
Kellyanne has been counseled, and that's all we're going to go with. She's been counseled on that subject, and that's it.
Can I ask a question? There's Reuters has a story out that includes a partial transcript of the president's call with Vladimir Putin,
Right.
in which he appears to express doubts about the New START treaty. Does he indeed have doubts about the New START treaty? Would he like to see that
The
renegotiated?
president's conversation with President Putin is a private call between the two of them, and I'm going to leave it at that. We put a readout on the call, and we have nothing further beyond that. John Gizzi.
Thank you, Sean. One question today.
Wow.
On February 2nd, Vladimir Kara-Murza, who is a well-known filmmaker in Russia and was a close associate of the late Boris Nemtsov, the dissident, found himself in critical condition.
Right.
His wife has since said she believes this is poisoning, very much like